Today, in the media conference with Lal Goel, which is brought to you by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV, News Gaon Se, Samvad Sarokar News, Organ Donation India Foundation, and Gyan. Our endeavor is to enlighten you with the current topic. And today, our topic is very current, and that is democracy versus mobocracy. As for or dictatorship. Second ideal form is aristocracy, and its perverted form is oligarchy. And the third ideal form is democracy, and its perverted form is mobocracy. According to Aristotle, these 6 forms of government will repeat time and again. Today, we will discuss about the merits and demerits of democracy versus mobocracy. According to Mahatma Gandhi, Western democratic procedures are a negation of democracy, which had the tendencies of imperialism. He did not believe in the limitless expansion of capitalism and exploitation of the weaker. And according to Mahatma Gandhi, I quote, "My notion of democracy is that under it, the weakest should have the same opportunity as the strongest. This can never happen except through non-violence," unquote. One moment, please. I will just... Democracy is the form of government that gives every man the right to be his own oppressor. Man's capacity for justice makes democracy possible, but man's inclination to injustice makes democracy necessary. Democracy is a form of government in which the people have the authority to choose their governing legislation. A democracy means rule by the people. The name is used for different forms of government where the people can take part in the decisions that affect the way their communities run. In modern times, there are different ways this can be done. The people meet to decide about new laws and changes to existing ones. This is usually called direct democracy. The people elect their leaders. These leaders take this decision about laws. This is commonly called representative democracy. The process of choosing is called election. Elections are either held periodically or when an office holder dies. Merit of democracy. A democratic government is a better government because it is a more accountable form of government. Democracy improves the quality of decision making. Democracy provides a method to deal with differences and conflicts. Democracy allows people to correct their own mistakes. In a democracy, people rule themselves as leaders are elected by them. Demerits of democracy. Democracy is all about political competition and power play. There is no scope for morality. Consultation in a democracy from many people leads to delays. Not knowing the best interest of the people by the elected leaders leads to bad decisions. Democracy leads to corruption, for it is based on elected competition. Democracy is an impossible thing until the power is shared by all, but let not democracy degenerate into mobocracy, said Mahatma Gandhi. Democracy is the opposite of totalitarianism, communism, fascism, or mobocracy. Mobocracy is the rule of government by a mob or mass of people and the intimidation of legitimate authorities. Mobocracy means the rule of government by mass of people. In this kind of government system, a powerful mob or mass of people take control of government in his or their hands. In past countries that were conquered by the warriors shows the ruling of mob. For example, from Alexander the Great to Genghis Khan, all represented the government of the mob. Latest example of mobocracy is government of ISIS in Iraq. In this system, a specific group of people decides all the political matters and public have no direct or indirect right in the political system of the country, as they are bound to do what has been decided for them by the mob. In democracy, citizens of the country are mostly remain involved indirectly in the political system through their elected representatives, while in mobocracy, there is no representation of public in the political system. In democracy, government is established and replaced by the opinions of the citizens, which they give through free and fair election. While in mobocracy, a specific powerful group of people control the whole state regardless of the demand of the public. Basic human rights are ensured in the democracy, as public can record their protests against any legislation, while there is no concept of human rights in mobocracy, and public is bound to live on the parameters that have been decided by the mob. There are equal rights for all citizens of the country in democracy, while there are no equal rights for all in mobocracy, as it is an autocratic form of government. Now, to discuss about the democracy versus mobocracy, we have a very elite, learned, experienced, knowledgeable panel with us. Sorry. I would like to invite my first guest, and he is Dr. C.V. Anand Bose, IAS. Dr. C.V. Anand Bose is one-man expert commission on labor to prepare an action plan for the welfare and development of the workforce in the context of COVID-19. He was former head of disaster management, Government of India, and Central Relief Commissioner, Government of India. He is also the principal advisor, Government of India Heritage Project. He is the chairman of Indian Red Cross, Kerala. He was the vice chancellor of National Museum, University of Delhi. Dr. Bose has authored 40 books in English, Malayalam, and Hindi, including novels, short stories, and essays. 4 of his books have become bestsellers. 4 books on Vastu and architecture and 1 book on housing received prestigious the Sharjah International Book Fair Award. Dr. Bose is an housing expert, innovator, writer, orator, and visionary. The path-breaking institutions set by him, such as Nirmiti Kendra Building Center, District Tourism Council, and Habitat Alliance, have been replicated at the state, national, and global level. He was the head of the prestigious Supreme Court Committee on the Treasures of Sri Padmanabhaswamy Temple. Dr. Bose addressed United Nations General Assembly and specialized sessions 5 times on various international issues. Dr. Bose is a recipient of 31 national and international awards, including United Nations Global Best Practice Award. He also received prestigious Jawaharlal Nehru Fellowship. Kerala government termed him Lord of Ideas. Former Prime Minister Mr. Manmohan Singh called him inspired civil servant, and our Honorable Prime Minister Mr. Modi called him Man of Ideas. Welcome Dr. C.V. Anand Bose on our show. Dr. Bose, today's topic is democracy versus mobocracy. We would like to know your views on this topic, that is democracy versus mobocracy. Dr. C.V. Anand Bose, IAS, please.
Thank you, Mr. Goel. I think you have very clearly defined the contours of democracy and mobocracy, quoting Aristotle and Mahatma Gandhi. I would say that democracy and mobocracy. Mobocracy is nothing but democracy, if I may say so. Mussolini has defined it. When he defined democracy, he was actually defining mobocracy. Mussolini said, democracy is a kingless regime infested by many kings who are more exclusive and tyrannical than one, if he be a king. The Supreme Court of India recently considered this issue when it came to the mass lynching which took place in Asansol, Alipurdwar, in Bengal, in Ghaziabad, and in various other parts of the country. In fact, Kerala also had an instance of lynching. Lynching a poor tribal boy for stealing food. Where has our society come to? The Supreme Court has instructed the government of India that they should come out with strong legislation against this ugly manifestation of mobocracy, lynching. The Supreme Court has also directed the government that nodal officers should be posted in every district to oversee implementation of this legislation and to ensure that mobocracy does not lead to instances like lynching. Amartya Sen, recently in an interview, he has also decried the growing instance of mobocracy in the world, not only in India. He finds that mobocracy and despotism both are calculated to instill fear in the minds of the people. No government can continue by making its people always under fear. So mobocracy is a phenomenon which has to be tackled very effectively if democracy has to survive. I may also say that mobocracy and democracy are two expressions which rhyme well. Demonization of democracy, if I may say so. See, for instance, mobocracy is nothing but demonizing democracy. I am reminded of an incident. The world finally ended. The devil is on the street, picking up humans and putting them freely in hell. One guy had a fight with his wife. He didn't know what actually is going on outside. So in the fury of the fight, he opens the door and comes out on the street and runs forward. He sees so many people running helter-skelter. And the devil finds, here is this one man who is not scared of me. The devil thought, maybe this fellow does not know who I am. So with a deafening roar, the devil says, I am the devil. I am coming from hell. This guy who was quarreling with his wife, he does not heed again. The devil asked him, don't you know I am the devil? Why are you not scared? And the young man replied nonchalantly, why should I be scared of you? I have been living with your sister for the last 40 years. Demonization of politics takes place in India and also in the other countries in a myriad of forms. Now, when we think of mobocracy and rule by the masses, we tend to think of the revolutionaries, all revolutions in the world, whether it is October Revolution or the Cultural Revolution or the French Revolution or the American Revolution or the mother of all revolutions, that is the Indian freedom struggle. All these were mass movements. But then, how came the communists never support? They want the dictatorship of the proletariat, but they never find mobocracy as a tool in this. If I may quote the acharyas of Marxism, Karl Marx himself. Karl Marx says in the Communist Manifesto, the first step in the revolution by the working class, is to raise the proletariat to the position of the ruling class, to win the battle with democracy, to abolish private property, wrest by degrees capital from bourgeoisie, centralize all instruments of production of the state. Mobocracy is never resorted to. Even though the ultimate aim is dictatorship of the proletariat, Karl Marx did not envisage a situation where power will be wrested by the mob. And adding to this, there is Chairman Mao, who led the Long March. That was, he did not favor mobocracy to come in, though they were all for the dictatorship of the proletariat. Chairman Mao said, the democratic revolution The democratic revolution is necessary preparation for the socialist revolution. So it is the evolutionary process of government, which even the revolutionaries espouse. So there is no place for or space for mobocracy in the scheme of things, whether it is in the democratic countries or in the communist countries. And now, during your mention about the democracy and mobocracy, you said about exploitation of man under capitalism. What is the difference between capitalism and socialism? Somebody said capitalism is exploitation of man by man, and socialism is vice versa. So let's not mix the ultimate economic objectives with the process of achieving it. The process of achieving it, every time, all leaders, whether evolutionary leaders or revolutionary leaders, they all favor democracy, not mobocracy. And now, when we come to what is happening in the country, I will stop here by narrating one or two unique experiences which I had as an administrator. I was hardly 25 when I was sub-collector. Somebody told me arson and looting is taking place in Kasaragod. I went there. Normally, the sub-collector need not be in the scene of action. It's the police who do that. I got into the police van and went. What I saw was bizarre. The well-meaning people whom I have seen earlier, they are torching the buildings. They are torching the vehicles. It is as if the hell is let loose. And when the police vehicle came, some youngsters came and created a roadblock. Some pipe which was there on the roadside was kept in the middle of the road. There I could see the action taken by the police. We normally decry the police in the most uncharitable terms. I could see these young policemen, not even young, pot-bellied old policemen are also there. They rush out, remove the roadblock, chase away the miscreants. Arson and looting is an essential part of mobocracy anywhere. And the second, I think our Vice Chancellor may vouch for it. When I was District Collector of Kollam, somebody told me there is again communal riots taking place there. Very unlikely because it's a place which is known for communal harmony. But when I went there alone, of course my gunman had gone. I got the man standing with a bayonet, the sentry from the superintendent of police office, and got him in the car and rushed to the place. I could see the same fiendish spectacle there. Torching of buildings, stopping vehicles, and it was hell let loose again. Now, the moral of the story is, who was behind this mobocracy? It is not the mob. We intercepted a jeep full of deadly weapons. That jeep belonged to one of the most respected leaders who was a minister. So mobocracy may be a manifestation, but behind every manifestation, there is a cause. And the cause is some interested political leader or any vested interest, which is trying to fan up passion so that they can wrest power in the easiest way. So I think there is more to it than meets the eye as far as mobocracy is concerned. We will come to the details after listening to the expert panelists who are here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bose, for giving your views about the democracy and mobocracy. And Dr. Bose quoted Mussolini, Karl Marx, Chairman Mao, as well as Mahatma Gandhi. And he was, in his opening remarks, he was very clear, and he made very clear that the democracy is the finest form of government, not the mobocracy. And he says even all the top leaders have decried about the mobocracy. Nobody given any weightage to the mobocracy. And he has also quoted the recent 2018 Supreme Court judgment, which clearly said that the mobocracy and that judgment was because of the lynching, mass lynching was taking place in the country at that time. And the Supreme Court gave the authority to the central government to form a very strong legislation to prevent this type of lynching, which was done by mobs only, and that is a mobocracy. And according to Dr. Bose, mobocracy should not be formed. And he has given his own examples or his experiences which he has faced initially, and he found that even in a demonstration which become violent, there are few people, either they are personally interested or their party is interested to create that atmosphere which will be shown like it's a mob is doing, but it is not mob, it is somebody instigate the mob to do the things. Thank you very much, Dr. Bose, for giving your opening remarks about the democracy versus mobocracy. Now I would like to invite my next guest, and he's Dr. M. Abdul Salam. Dr. M. Abdul Salam is PhD and postdoctorate from UK. Dr. Salam is the former Vice Chancellor of the prestigious University of Calicut, which is one of the largest and reputed university in India. As a renowned educationist, agricultural scientist, and education administrator, Dr. Salam, in a career spanning more than 4 decades, from 1975 to 2020, across continents, has established a great reputation as a tireless academic and scientist, besides being recognized as one of the most authoritative voice in the area of higher education. He is an academician and scientist with great zeal and enthusiasm. He has published 153 research papers, 15 review articles, and 13 books in biological science. Welcome, Dr. Abdul Salam, on our show. Dr. Salam, you have heard what Dr. C.V. Anand Bose has spoken, and he clearly, in clear words, he said that mobocracy is not the correct form of the government. Definitely, even the earlier philosopher, even Aristotle also said it's a perverted form of the government of the democracy. But he says that whatsoever the mobocracy is not the thing which is liked by any of the leading leaders as well as any country. And he says that Supreme Court has also come out with a strong legislation. Now, but we would like to know from you, the democracy versus mobocracy. Dr. M. Abdul Salam, please. Please unmute yourself. Dr. Salam, please unmute.
Hello.
Yes, yes, please, go ahead.
Good morning, Lalji, Dr. Anand Bose-ji, and our other panelists. I missed his name.
Mr. Rajshekharan. Mr. Rajshekharan.
Mr. Rajshekhar, and viewers across the planet. Now, my name is, as mentioned, Dr. M. Abdul Salam. I am a former Vice Chancellor and as educationist now. I was, very clearly looking at the two terms, the democracy versus mobocracy. The differences were clearly explained by both Lalji as well as Dr. Anand Bose. Now, when the word comes to me, democracy versus mobocracy, the democracy, the first thing is ruled by the people. Of the people, by the people, and for the people is the well-known statement about democracy. And you can just replace the people with a mob or a mass, it will become mobocracy. Of the people, of the mob, by the mob or the mass, and for the mob, for the limited group of people. In democracy, we know it is an elected or vote-based. On the other side, there is no election, no vote-based. In democracy, we work with a written constitution. There is no written constitution on the other side. Democracy, we ensure equal rights to all citizens. There may be or may not be for the mob only, not for others. Equal rights for the mob or the members. The basic human rights are protected in democracy, but that is not there in the mobocracy. Decision making is solely by the government in democracy. The other side, it is done by the group leader. Democracy, power with the people, power with the mob. That is the mobocracy. The relatively more discipline, I use the word relatively more disciplined in democracy, but today's democracy, I don't believe that there is much discipline, but compared to mobocracy, there is discipline in mobocracy. Only the group leader and the group, I don't know how much of discipline they ensure. Democracy, there is educate freedom for everybody, liberty for everybody, equality for everybody, justice, ensure justice, and also permit pluralism, which are absent in democracy. And democracy, there are four pillars. As we all know, the legislature, the executive, judiciary, and the media, those such pillars exist in democracy. And the best democracies, the best rated democracies with the top ranking, New Zealand, Denmark, US is also there. US is democratic, but in the 10-point rating, it is getting only 7.96 index out of 10. India coming next with 6.9. Then we have good democracies like Norway, Sweden, Finland, Iceland, Australia. And it is another observation that, over years, among nations, the democratic trend, conversion from autocratic or authoritarian or democratic regimes to democracy, the trend is increasing. More and more nations are coming to the regime of democratic governance, and the governance are sometimes called the democracy, full democracy, flawed democracy, hybrid regimes, and authoritarian regimes. And the worst among these is the example is North Korea. I'm sure by and large, globally, people are accepting the philosophy of democracy because it ensures equal opportunity and justice and freedom that all wished by everybody. So the transformation from authoritarian or democratic way of governance to democracy is increasing day by day. But there is no dispute over this question of whether we should be democratic or democratic. There is no difference in opinion. Everybody will opine that the democratic way of governance will be the best. But my worry is, with this conviction, I also believe I am just expressing my opinion based on my personal experiences in a democratic, the largest democratic country, India, comparing what is happening in other nations of flawed democracy or hybrid democracy or authoritarian regimes. I have the feeling, I don't know, it is an aberrant feeling, the democracies and the people, say for example, India with 138.6 crores of people, of so much of diversity, so much of mental health, physical health, belief diversity, etc., etc., given with so much of freedom, are they utilizing the rights and the freedom vested or made available for them in a just manner, ensuring the basic principles of their strength towards nationalistic feelings, equity feelings, feeling of justice for everybody? Are they not hijacking the freedom of others to meet their own interests, maybe political interests or religious interests or financial interests? Are we matured enough to enjoy the so much of freedom that is vested in our constitutional rights? Are we in the right way, or should we think of some ways and means of putting some brakes here and there, at least for some time, to keep the people who are just driving out of the track? These are all, questions that we have to consider. I will quote an example from my experience. I'm 68 years old. At least over 60 years I was living in my own country, and the remaining years I was working and serving and consulting in several nations along and across the planet. And 2017 to 2019, I had the opportunity to live in UAE, which is not a democratic country. You can call it as an autocratic country, or maybe in some such way, there is no election and all that. But remember, the Indian citizens whose DNA and blood is full with democratic freedom and freedom of everything, when they land in UAE, the Dubai, and be there for some time, they don't want to come back. The person who shout Ingulab Sindabad and extend his fingers to the nose of the neighbor and obstruct him for everything, utilizing his rights all the time, is believing of his rights, not the neighbor's rights. And the government and the democracy is permitting such rights, but failing in controlling his stretching of the finger beyond the nose of the neighbor. Is it appropriate to allow such a democracy? I'm not saying that democracy is bad. I'm just observing some undesirable features of the democracy when it is in practice. Now, this is my worry all the time. I was also in UAE for 2 years. I was so comfortable over there. There is development, there is equity, there is justice, there is discipline. That is the key word. I say discipline, DD. Discipline is there, dedication is there. And there is no delay. And the problem with the democracy I enjoyed over 60 years of my life in my own country is the failure I observed in terms of 1, delay, 2, inefficiency, 3, corruption, more, uncontrolled use of own rights, breaking the rights of others, failure of the governments to control such things. Is it not is it not demanding some sort of control over the democracy, some amendments, maybe some synthesis, or some sort of hybridization, or some sort of reduction of certain
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
rights and watching what is happening. That Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, please. We hear you. We can hear
Yeah. Now I'm going to conclude by saying that number one, I say democracy is the best and the best and the best available. What I am trying to say is the democracy that we see today that demands some sort of amendment that will ensure the provisions of the constitution for everybody in terms of equity, freedom and all that. Maybe by curbing some overuse of freedom by some strong muscled group, maybe politicians, maybe gundas, maybe anybody, and also to curb the diversity in mental state, physical state, religious state, so that there should be some balancing. And again, I quoted one system, an authoritarian system, which is serving much better than a democratic system. That may be due to some amendment they have made in the authoritarian system that will attract every human being to be there with them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Salam, for giving your views. First of all, I would like to apologize because my net, although we are in 21st century, but net is still giving the problem in this part of the country. And so I was away out of the thing. But what I heard, what Dr. Salam has said, he says democracy is the best, the best, the best, but it requires lots of corrections, and in which he says the extra freedom has been given to many groups that should be curtailed, and it should be, and he has compared he was there in UAE, and he says although it's not a democratic country, but whatsoever they are still doing better than many democratic countries. So he says no doubt about it that the democracy is far better than democracy, but with some riders or some corrections or some curbs in the democracy is required to curb the extra freedom which people are misusing and harming the democratic values of the country. Thank you very much, Dr. Salam, for giving your frank views about the democracy versus mobocracy. Now I would like to invite my next guest, and he is Mr. Niloli P. Rajashekharan. Mr. Rajashekharan is a writer, music composer, and CEO of Guru Management Consultants, Bengaluru. His creative and social activities includes publishing 6 Malayalam novels and over 40 short stories. He published, one moment, please. He published 2 English novels, King Pawn, based and on Syrian civil war, and Azadi, based on the conflict in Kashmir. He has published Competency Web, the Corporate DNA, and several other papers. He composed over 200 songs for labels and independent music. Currently promoting 3 YouTube channels. He is coaching and mentoring startups. He is having experience of 45 years of international director level. He worked for profit and not-for-profit organizations for 15 years in financial services like Bank of India, Chase Manhattan, and Standard Chartered Bank. 10 years in oil and gas like Shell, Exxon, Mobil, Qatar Petroleum, etc. And 10 years in non-profits, CGIAR, World Bank funded international system. 10 years in consultancy and teaching MBA students, entrepreneurs, and corporates. He lived and worked in over 45 countries across continents. He is a management consultant, coach, speaker, creative writer, musician, and active on social media. He is a strategist on grievances, performance management, leadership development, and HR. His expertise in management of startup downsizing, high growth, turnaround, and cultural transformations. He is a member of Mensa International. Welcome, Mr. Rajashekharan, on our show. Mr. Rajashekharan, you have heard what Dr. C.V. Anand Bose and what Dr. M. Abdul Salam has spoken. And you have experience of 45 years, and you have visited more than 45 countries. Rather, you worked across those continents. So it means you have an experience of different forms of governments which you might have come across with different countries. Now, we would like to know from you the democracy versus mobocracy. Mr. Niloli P. Rajashekharan, please. Please unmute yourself. Please unmute. Yes, please.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Mr. Goel. And first of all, thanks to the other panelists who have done a good job of defining the framework within which this discussion could be a lot more meaningful, and also to all the people who are watching this show. Now, my job has been made slightly easier by Dr. Bose as well as by Dr. Salam, who have defined the parameters, or if I might say, given a robust framework within which the discussion could happen. So my first question was that when we discuss issues like these, or concepts like these, like democracy or mobocracy, it can mean different things to different people. So to get onto a common platform was important. So I'll add just 1 or 2 things more to that definition, because most of it's been covered. One thing is that when the Greek combined demos and kratos, the two words. One, demos meaning the citizens living in a defined area, city, state, or whatever, and also kratos, which means power or rule. It was based on a belief of shared power, which meant there was a suspicion about concentration of power, whether by individuals, groups, or governments. And that's underlying democracy. So whenever democracy steps, and this is very relevant to the excellent points made by Dr. Abdul Salam, when you start looking at how democracy evolves or can evolve, this is an important definition because there is a fear of or a suspicion of concentration of power, which has been the underlying basis for the I would say the genesis of democracy as well as its evolution. So that's one thing I would say, which is probably relevant for the discussions we are going to have. And the second thing in democracy is that democracy, whichever way you define, is a representation of the majority, which means there will always be a minority. 51% is enough to rule, so there'll be 49% who may not agree with everything that you do. So how do we manage those people, and how do we include them into the decision making, or how do we engage them with the decision making, and how do we communicate with that group which is not part of the ruling party or the winning party or the leading party in democracy is an important aspect. I think these are all relevant to look at not just what is democracy versus mobocracy, but why is it happening? Why is mobocracy increasing in places? Especially, let's focus on India, and I'll bring in overseas experience as we go along. So in the first part of this discussion, I'm going to mention a few things on which we could build later on. The first is that there's a minority that needs to be managed, or the losing party that needs to be managed in any democracy, because it just represents the majority. Even a 2/3 majority for constitutional change would mean that there could be a 1/3 out there who don't believe in what's being done. So that is one part of it. The second aspect is democracy has a very implicit value in it called restraint. And restraint is very important because it's a spirit of accommodation, which leads to a path of probably reconciliation. A democracy is the only political system that seeks to reconcile diverse aspirations and demands, and to bring welfare to the maximum number of people possible. Not to all the people, it's important, to the maximum number of people. There'll always be some outside that net who may not believe in it, who may not want to do it, or who may just have other agendas. So it's a very important distinction to make when we look at how democracy could evolve into the future. Now, mobocracy on the other side, on the definitional aspect, it's in 1754 that it was first time used, as Merriam-Webster dictionary says, and is a domination by the mob. The other word that's used is ochlocracy. Ochlocracy is the rule of government by a mob, and the Latin, it close to the Latin phrase called vulgus, which also means the fickle crowd, or from where it was divided. I think the mob name came from that. Now, ochlocracy, according to Greek thinkers, is one of the three bad forms of government, which is tyranny, oligarchy, and ochlocracy. Those are three bad forms of government contrasted against three good forms of government, which is monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy. And the important question is good and bad in what sense? And that also they have defined. Good or bad depending on whether the government would act in the interest of the whole community or in the exclusive interest of a group or individuals. And that's where the distinction comes in terms of good and bad. If any of these forms of government is working in the interest of the whole community, then it is a form of good government. Whereas if it's looking parochially at the interest of a group of people, not looking at the entire populace or the population of a group that you're representing, then it's not a good government. So it's a good definition there. And going back to what Dr. Salam said about UAE, I've spent about 10 years in the Middle East, and I share the same view. As long as the government is looking after the common interest of the whole community, that's all that matters. Nobody cares about what form of government, who's making decisions, as long as decisions are being made in a timely manner and brings betterment to the livelihood of people. And that's a definition, that's it. So it doesn't matter what you define it or what name you give, what label you give it to them. I strongly believe in that view. And that's a very important distinction to make when we look at governments or autocracy or any of these forms of government. Now, a couple of other distinctions. Democracy works within law and order. That's a big distinction. Whereas a mob has no mind. I'm quoting Gandhi here. They have no mind, no premeditation. They act in frenzy. And then what happens is the leadership that emerges out of a mobocracy, plays to the gallery, plays to the crowd, because they are the gallery. And there is also an exclusion there. Any of these mobs do not represent the entire populace or entire constituents or interested stakeholders in any case. So there is a large interest groups that could be left out of a mob and its agenda. The second part is the legitimacy or the representation in democracy. Despite any large number of people coming together, mobocracy can never be the reflection of democracy. Again, Gandhiji. The entire population does not have the power or the right to elect either the representatives or the mob. The mob decides on its own, so it's not truly representative. So the legitimacy in representation is an important aspect, and also depends on context and position. Now, it's very interesting when we look at mobocracy, which is increasing in India, depending on your own beliefs, depending on one's own beliefs and interests, people justify mobocracy at times. When it comes to lynching, some people justify it, some people don't justify it. When it comes to any of these kinds of rebellions or uprisings, there can be 2 points of view. And rightly so. But the point is, when you reverse that, the same people who suppose mobocracy will come back and say the mob should not determine morality. So there is a dichotomy in the thinking there, because and it aligns with your own agenda, then you tend to support those kind of activities. And there have been many of these cases. Recently in India, in Kerala, there have been a few cases where a few women went and beat up a man who was spreading bad news about them in the social media. But then the court has very clearly said that you can't take law into your own hands no matter what, because that leads to anarchy and not to a stable form of government. And the last point I would make is, in a democracy, democracy protects minorities or individuals against short-term demagogues or moral panic. And that's a very essential part of it. Whereas in mobocracy, a mob could represent a very vested interest, and it could work against many, many other groups. So it is not in the interest of the country or in the interest of the group itself, because it may not be a sustaining action that they take in that process. Now, I would also look at a couple of examples. Now, shifting it slightly, because definitional issues are behind us, I'm going to look at why is it increasing in India. I'm going to look at some of the reasons. So in the next round of discussions, as usual, we can go into some solutions or potentially some suggestions for solutions. This has started in India right from the legislatures. The kind of mob behavior that has been displayed in state legislatures by MLAs, elected representatives of people, have been actually shameful. There is still a case in the High Court of Kerala where a group of politicians inside the assembly broke public property and caused damages. And then they come into power and they go to the High Court and say this case should be withdrawn. Shameful behaviors. This has gone on to the highest level. It has happened in Parliament as well. It has come to a stage where there have been people get into the middle of the Parliament, they tear up legislations, they do all sorts of things. So the mob behavior is demonstrated by elected representatives of the country. And going back to what Dr. Salam said, if a correction needs to happen, it needs to happen from people who we elect to represent this country, and such people should be accountable for that. They represent the highest values of democracy. They have been elected by a large number of people to represent our interests, and such shameful behaviors cannot be allowed. And there must be some kind of recourse and some kind of consequences for such actions. And that's one place we could really start. The second part is in terms of looking at mobs and why they happen. I mentioned earlier that there's always a group of people who are outside of the government, outside of the dominant groups, outside of the elected parties. How we deal with them have 2 aspects to consider. One, democracy progresses through a series of corrections. No government can make all the decisions perfectly correct. But the other option is not to make decisions, which some have adopted, but that's not the answer. So when 100 decisions are made, 10 of them may go wrong, 20 of them may go wrong, but the willingness to listen to people who you represent and faithfully represent their interests is an important one. It's a 2-way dialogue. And when that dialogue breaks down, it can lead to mobocracy. And that is one big aspect which every ruling party or everyone who's in power should probably take a little more seriously in India. And that comes from a communication protocol or a communication exercise where people don't equally understand what is being said. And that's more true of India, where we have a lot of illiterate people, a lot of people with basic education or even less than basic education. And so how do we get those people to understand the implications of what is being proposed and the consequences of what is being proposed so that you get their buy-in is a very, very important part of democracy. And I don't think it's getting adequate attention. Here, I would say the media has a large role to play, but unfortunately, again, the media in India are getting very slanted and they're taking sides. So depending on who you represent or who you want to represent or who you believe in, media is also distorting information. If you look at mobocracy, a lot of mobocracy stems from distorted information basis. A lot of distorted information gets in and that's perpetuated and that's supplemented and it's amplified. All these things add to mob behavior because they say there is no other recourse, nobody's listening to us, whereas sometimes they don't understand what's the reality. I could go into some examples related to the present struggle in terms of agricultural law. I've spoken to different people and many people don't even understand what it means. And some people have already started using it, like in Kerala, there is a setup that's been done to bypass the spices board, and the cardamom growers have set up a unit to directly auction cardamom and get better prices. There are several misunderstandings about the contribution of Punjab and Haryana to agriculture. When you look at facts, they don't represent what it was before. There are many other states contributing, whereas 70% of the MSP seems to go to Punjab and Haryana. So I'm not against anybody. What I'm saying is if Punjab and Haryana takes the lead in setting the agenda for that through a mobocracy, then the decisions that are made may not be in the interest of the larger agriculturists in the country. So there has to be a balanced view of it. But I would immediately also at the same time say that it's a ruling party's responsibility to make sure that this understanding happens. So the investment into proper communications, and I would say neutral communications or honest communications, is a very important aspect in controlling this. There are many other points, but I would like to stop here because we could have probably a couple of rounds of discussions. I think I've introduced a few concepts here on which I'm sure the esteemed other speakers can build on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rajshekharan. And Mr. Rajshekharan explained what is the role in a government of a democracy. The 51% can rule the country. But he has also emphasized that those 49%, or even if it's a 2/3 majority, the 1/3, they have to be taken in confidence when any legislation is to be made for the benefit of the public. And he says, because everyone has to be included in the democracy. He also vouched what Dr. Salam says. He says, yes, the Middle East, he also stayed for 10 years, and there the conditions are better because they are doing the work for the betterment of the people there, the citizens there. But only thing is, once you are getting your basic needs fulfilled, you are not bothered who is taking decisions, who is not taking decisions. And he has also mentioned about the media. He says the media is is very partial nowadays. Either they are pro or against, and they are not giving the fair picture which they are supposed to give. And he has also touched upon the new Agriculture Act, which he says that there are some states are benefiting and some states which are benefiting or not benefiting, but it might be a mobocracy trend that they are not being explained properly. So that that's why these things are happening. Thank you very much, Mr. Rajshekharan, for giving your views. Now I would like to go back to Dr. C.V. Anand Bose. Dr. C.V. Anand Bose, you have heard all the esteemed panelists. Now, my question to you is, like Dr. Salam has mentioned, that we have to curb some extra freedom. This is the second time we are hearing recently. The first we have heard from the CEO of Niti Aayog, Mr. Amitabh Kant, who says too much democracy. Now, the sense which is coming out in the public perception is that the democracy in India has to be curbed and to suit now for either for the ruling party or to suit for good governance, or just to curb the opposition in the country so that the country can be ruled without any voice of dissent in the country. What you say whether it is good or bad for the democracy, because our forefathers who has written the constitution or who thought about the democracy, they have never mentioned that you should not have a freedom of speech or freedom of right to live without any distinction of caste, creed, religion, language, and your state, etc. So what are your views, Dr. C.V. Anand Bose, please? Please unmute yourself. Please unmute.
I'm glad to hear that my distinguished younger colleague in the service, Mr. Amitabh Kant, has said that there is too much of democracy in this country. I would say there is too much of democracy in this country, a little too far. In fact, too much of anything can cause a surfeit, which can lead to so many ugly manifestations. In our view, the sun is the most brilliant entity in the world, the meridian splendor. But ask his wife, Sanjana. Sanjana would say that I find this guy intolerable because of too much of brightness. So she leaves him, goes to her dad, Vishwakarma, and tells him, too much of brightness, I can't put up with it. You know what Vishwakarma does? Vishwakarma churns his son-in-law, takes away almost 30% of his brightness. With that, he creates great things like the Pushpaka Vimana and the Trishul, and of course the Sudarshan Chakra. Once too much of brightness is taken away, the sun becomes tolerable. I think that's what Sri Abdul Salam has said, and also Mr. Rajshekharan, and now Amitabh Kant. Dr. Abdul Salam said there should be discipline, too much of freedom. And he said, freedom of expression is certainly basic to democracy, but the freedom also has its limitations. As a famous saying says, I have the freedom to swing my hand, but it ends where the nose of the other man begins. That is why, at one stage, the much decried emergency in this country was hailed by Vinoba Bhave as Anishasan Parv. We have to draw the Lakshman Rekha, even in the exercise of our freedom. Freedom is not unlimited, especially in government. Governance means what? Governance means limiting freedom, not taking away freedom, regulation. We have heard about basic democracy, guided democracy, but in India, we have the real democracy. Dr. Radhakrishnan once said, if the flame of democracy is put out in India, darkness will spread throughout the Asiatic continent, nay, the whole world. Therefore, point number one, we are all for democracy. And democracy within limits. That is what is required. Balanced democracy is what India needs. Now, where does it degenerate in a mobocracy? Mr. Rajshekharan said about the farmers' agitation now. What is the farmers' agitation? I am speaking from Delhi. In some parts of Delhi, we hear an agitation which people say are done by an event manager. Political agitations are given to the event managers. And by the flow of money that is there, some people decry it as a five-star agitation. Does it really reflect the will of the farmers? If I may go in the lighter vein, there was this farmer in Punjab who was driving his tractor, little overspeedy. The tractor turned topsy-turvy. The boy, that is a farmer's son, who was within the tractor, he was thrown off. The neighbors come out. They see the boy unconscious and bleeding. They took him inside the house, nursed him, and he gained consciousness. Then he said, I want to go. My father won't like this. I want to go. They said, no. Take rest, my dear boy. have some breakfast. We'll take care of you. He had his breakfast. My dad won't like this. My dad won't like this. They pacified him. Then they said, where is your dad? Don't worry. We'll go and tell him. Where is your dad? And he said, my dad is under the tractor. Now, the so-called agitators here who are supposed to support the farmers, they do not know that Indian farming is under the traction of the middlemen. If we come to the realities, I do not want to take more time on that. The three legislations which are agitated against on the streets, what are those? One, it does not abolish the APMC Act. It only takes away the exploitative tendencies of the middlemen from in the mandis. Number two, the second act gives freedom to the farmer to enter into contract with anybody. It can be the processor, it can be the investor, it can be the exporter, and an agreed upon price will be given. If the market fluctuation demands, more price can also be given. The farmer can sell his produce wherever he wants, at whatever price he is satisfied with. What is wrong in that? And the third act, the amendment to the Essential Commodities Act. Yes, this takes away the inspector's right to harass the farmer for hoarding things. Now, these three acts were recommended by all the political parties. I do not want to play politics here, but I want to state facts. Before the Lok Sabha election, the party which is agitating against it now, they had given clearly in their manifesto that if we come to power, the APMC Act will be amended, the Essential Commodities Act will be amended. And the General Secretary of the Marxist Communist Party said the exploitative tendencies which impede the growth of farmer has to be curbed. In that case, is it not a national consensus that is reflected in these legislations? And now, the public are taught to believe that the farmers will be exploited by the corporates. Who can run down the farmers like this? Are the farmers nincompoops or idiots as they are portrayed to be? Are they scared of the corporates? Do you remember? There was a corporate in India, a corporate which had an army of its own. No other corporate has an army of its own. There was a corporate in India for a brief while with an army of its own. Who packed them off? The farmers. You might have heard the name of the corporate, English East India Company. The English East India Company was packed off from this country. The farmers stood together under Gandhiji and said, quit India. They had to quit India. And why these crocodile tears over the corporates? Who are the corporates they are agitating against? Are there only two corporates in this country? Ambani's and Adani's. Do you remember? If in the 80s, the Coca-Cola came here. They killed 12 factories, processing factories in India. Then came unseemly, like COVID, the courier services, DHL, Federal Express, and who are the others? All big corporates came and took over the entire courier service in this country. And then comes Amazon, stealthily into your drawing room, in your kitchen, on your dining table. No protest against this. The car companies, automobiles, Hyundai or Honda, whatever it is, no protest against them. The protest is only when an Indian corporate has not stepped into this field. The apprehension. To the Indian corporates, we say, go back from India. What justification is there? Therefore, the people are misled. And why this misleading? There are forces behind it. The intelligence agencies are on record, as reported in the media, that behind this massive agitation engineered by the event managers, there is the left, whatever is left of the Khalistanis. China's money is there, Pakistan's money is there, and the ultra leftists are there. Is this a farmers' agitation, or is it nothing but driven mobocracy to topple the democratically elected government of this country? People have to think about it. Mobocracy has been engineered. Mobocracy has been orchestrated. People will soon come to realize what is right and what is wrong. I think the worst example of this mobocracy has been seen in this country in the last few years. Look at scrapping of Article 370. in Kashmir. Then the Citizenship Amendment Act. We saw manifestations of democracy in various hues, all aided by foreign funding and for the destabilization of this country. I do not want to expand on this, but on one thing, the Delhi riots, there is always an inquiry report. Now it is in the public domain. 120 crores of rupees given by Pakistan and the terror funding organizations in the world, parked in 73 accounts in India, given to various political parties. There are only 6 individuals who are behind engineering this riot. Now, what do we conclude? Democracy is in peril. That is why it is said, freedom is in peril. Defend it with all your might. Democracy, the manifestations of democracy in India has taught us, be vigilant. But India will certainly overcome this. As Martin Luther King said, we shall overcome. The democracy will be swept away and democracy will re-establish its way in the largest democratic country in India. Satyameva Jayate. Thank you.
Satyamev Jayate, says Dr. C.V. Anand Bose, and he has described in details of my simple question, although he also agrees what CEO of Niti Aayog, Mr. Amitabh Kant said, and he says that yes, too much democracy should not be there, so it cannot be misused. Anyway, that we will have a separate discussion on this particular topic. Now I would like to go to Dr. M. Abdul Salam. Dr. M. Abdul Salam, you have mentioned about the benefits in UAE, you have mentioned about the shortcomings of the democracy in India, and you have also mentioned about the Greek thing. Now, do you agree with Aristotle when he said there will be 6 forms of government? And he said very clearly that once the first form, that is the monarchy, will become perverted, then the tyranny or the dictatorship will come. And then few of the aristocrat people will join hands, they will revolt against that dictatorship, then the aristocracy will come. And when those few people who are ruling, and they will have the self-interest and they will try to pull the legs of each other, then immediately the oligarchy will come and the perverted form. And then they say the public will revolt, the democracy will come. And when it will become like Dr. C.V. Anand Bose mentioned, when the mob will be starting coming on the roads and doing those things which is required or not required, then the mobocracy will come. But according to Aristotle, then again, better sense will prevail and then monarchy will come. So, because why I'm asking this question, I asked the same question in 1972 to our late Prime Minister, Mr. Morarji Desai, myself. Being the student of political science, I happened to meet him and I asked the same question. And our Mr. Morarji Desai, he told me, no, it is not possible in India. I gave an example to him also, that when Akbar, which we considered him as a monarch, the perverted form when Aurangzeb came. And then the aristocracy initially, the East India Company, when they were doing some good things for the country in the form of aristocracy, starting the railway lines and whatnot. Then when they started looting the country, that became the oligarchy. Then in 1947, the democracy took place. And at that time, I told him, don't you think now the condition is of mobocracy? What is going to happen? He said, no, India is having lots of religion, caste, creed, language, whatnot. It is not possible. But it happened in 1975 in the form of emergency. Initially, as Dr. Bose also mentioned, initially the emergency was for the benefit of the public at large, so that the control of the mobocracy. But then it became a dictatorship, as you all know. And 1977, again, aristocracy came in the form of Janata Dal government. Then 1980-81, we have seen again. So this chain is going on. Do you think, Dr. Salam, the country is going to see a change in the form of monarchy? If it is right now mobocracy, the next change will be like someone will come and say, no, I am going to rule. Might be the present ruler, or someone who says, now I want to do it in either in a presidential form of government or in a monarchy and change the government. What are your views, Dr. Salam, about this? Please unmute yourself. Please unmute.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Hello.
Go ahead. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Lal, I was listening to Anand Bose ji as well as Rajshekhar ji, and also your thoughts. No, I am expressing again, just like an ordinary citizen of India. As an ordinary citizen of India, I am not concerned about the terminologies, whether it is monarchy, aristocracy, or oligarchy. What? But I'm not concerned about the terminology. I am concerned about a model regime that will ensure the good qualities enshrined in our constitution, the liberty, the freedom, equity, justice, everything which every citizen allowed to have. We can talk about the theory of democracy, but when it comes to the practice, we fail. Why? Look at the four pillars of democracy which we often talk about. Legislature. Are we capable of setting up a quality legislature with a value system, with good quality, service oriented, good for people, capable of providing good governance? As Rajshekhar said, good governance is a governance that will be useful or acceptable to 10% large number of people. Do we have a mechanism to install a good quality legislature instead of filling it or dumping with, I don't want to use the word third rate or second rate people, undesirable people in the legislature? That demolished the essence of democracy, number one. From where you move to executive, pillar number one is, dampened, is gone, beyond repair. Pillar number two, executive. Do you think that the executive that you and I are seeing today in our democracy is the one which you and I like and they can discharge the responsibilities attached to? We failed there in the practice. Theory, yes, very good theory. Come to the third one, judiciary. Hey, 28 years after you are delivering justice, 4-5 crores of cases getting accumulated from magistrate court to the Supreme Court. People are dying in the courts. Just judgments are released after 28 years, 42 years, even after the death of a person. And alleged, malpractices associated, the delay, inordinate delay. Then the next one, media, the status of media, interest-centric media. The four pillars are broken, not just simple, completely broken, I say. Then how can you have, I don't want to say completely broken, I say largely broken, broken. So beyond repair. And how can you think of, we can only talk about democracy. So if you want to repair that, you need strong hands, strong leaders, value-rich leaders, leaders with commitment, honesty, dedication. Rarely we get. Luckily, we have one good leader now, Lalji. I'm happy to say that the leader we have at the center is today capable of slowly repairing. It is not easy to repair all these pillars immediately. It will take time. Once you do that, things will be, providing little more relief to the common man. I again mentioned evolutionary sequence of the terminology starting from monarchy. As a common man, I am not at all concerned about the term. I am concerned about the model, the governance model, the good governance model. Is it a New Zealand model or a UAE model or US model, which can ensure what everybody wish in terms of freedom, zero corruption, equity, equality, freedom of equal opportunity, and everything you and I love. If that governance model, you call it by any name, can be synthesized or modified or redeveloped, that is what is required. That is what we are looking for. So I would say that democracy is having large number of essential good qualities that we are looking for. But unfortunately, in the process of following democracy, we failed in the practical implementation of it. Instituting a good legislature, we failed. Value-rich, corruption-free legislature, value-rich, corruption-free executive, a good quality judiciary, good quality media, mechanism for avoiding delay, quick decision. I believe the digital India concept, delivery of service will be fast. But decision making should also be fast. The judiciary should not keep all the cases for all the time. No, more than I can tell you, I was told by a person, court cases of age more than 4 decades are still there in many courts. I would request you, Lalji, to have a discussion on this. Why judiciary is failing like this? Why the legislature is failing like this? Why executive is failing like this? Why the media, all the media are going interest-centric? Every political party is having media. They are distorting, they are misguiding the people. Again, the people I told you, unfortunately, I realized as a vice chancellor that, if you take 100 people, people are of varying mental health, ability to understand, ability to easily influence, mental health, physical health, ability to understand. That is the floating media in the vote bank, they can move this way and that way. So it is easy to distort their minds. So what is required? I believe the theory and practice of the philosophy of democracy by correcting the 4 pillars, making it strong, making it value rich, making it people centric. We talk about people centric. What is people centric? Now, I believe the other day I was talking, I tell you, now people are going to public offices for getting every service. The government should have a reverse mechanism. The public offices should reach the doorstep with services, with the certificates. Why should I go for a certificate to the public office? Why can't the government provide the certificate to the doorstep? Is it not possible? It again talking about, public, private. What is public and private? Hardly 2 or 3% of the government employees, government officers, government servants, they talk about public. And 95-97% of the large amount of people, they talk about private. There is discrimination between this public and private. The so-called private people constituting more than 95%, they have no role in opinion making unless they are a member of the legislature or a ward member. They will not be inducted even in a committee. That sort of discrimination, public, hesitation to accommodate public-private participation, understanding the private, the so-called private representing 95%, our inability to take service. I say, if I get an opportunity to meet the Prime Minister, I will tell him first, sir, is it possible to reverse the service flow delivery from leaving home and going to the office and getting the service instead? Why not the service come to my home? We have people, we have services. We can, the digital, more the digital, less will be the corruption, I believe. So these are my thoughts. I am not concerned about the name, but I am concerned about the content of the governance you call.
Oh.
Call by any name, and it will be a synthesized form of government.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Salam. We can understand your anguish, and Dr. Salam said that all the 4 pillars failed. And when he mentioned about the judiciary, he said, I want to tell you, Dr. Salam, we have done a program called Justice Delayed is Justice Denied, and in which one of the honorable former Justice of High Court was also present in that program. And it was very clearly, as you said, you are rightly said that everyone is failed in this. And one important point which Dr. Salam mentioned is He says we are not bothered which type of form of government, but we want that service should be there for the benefit of the public at large. And he mentioned about the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, that he is the person who can take or lead to see to it that he can rule, whether you term is a monarchy or whatsoever term you will say, so that the country can go ahead without any problems. Thank you very much, Dr. Salam. Although there is a paucity of time, that's why otherwise we would have more discussion on these points. Now I would like to go to my next guest, and he is Mr. Rajshekharan. Mr. Rajshekharan, you have mentioned two things. Although you have mentioned many things, but two important things. Because of the paucity of time, I will just highlight. One, you said about the Representation Act. You said the criminals are coming and those who are not having good things as MLA or MP. For that, no, not a single political party is having will to restrict them. So many times it has happened, but no, not a single political party. So here the democracy failed, because we, as Dr. Salam mentioned, 95% or more have no say in this legislation. Otherwise, the first say should be that all those who are having any types of cases, and especially the corruption, murder, rape, serious cases, they should not be allowed to even given a ticket by a party, forget about the contesting the election. That is one. Secondly, you mentioned about the agriculture thing. I have done two programs on that. One was when Dr. Bose was also there, and another program I have done. Don't you think the government should clarify in details the publicly about the Farm Act? Because there are some, I will say, misconception is still there. I have done two programs. I am also, still I require more tuition on that or knowledge on that. Like I will tell you, the government says that we are removing the middleman. But if you see the section 10 of this act, which says there are two middlemen now, not one middleman. One is aggregator and another is a service provider. Now, it might be that my understanding is wrong or the public understanding is wrong. Why not government should come forward and tell publicly by way of advertisement, in the full page of advertisement in the newspapers or on the television, say that these are the laws, these are the things, and these are the meaning of this. There is no question of aggregator or these are not the middlemen. Secondly, about the MSP, which is making a very, very highlight thing. Now, MSP, as you have mentioned about the Punjab and Haryana, yes, if there is a problem, why not the government? I am saying because we want a solution. We also feel that our capital of the country, people are talking to me from other countries and they are laughing on us that your capital of the country is seized. And by some handful of farmers or motivated persons, why it is happening, why the government is not clarifying in details. Although now I think that decision has been taken and the ministers and others are coming to the channel, but why not come out point by point, give all the explanation that there is no middleman, their MSP is applicable not only for the government, it should be applicable for the corporate houses. Last time, I remember the FICCI's agriculture president was there, and I asked the same question to him, whether the MSP will be applicable for the corporates or not. Because as Dr. Salam mentioned, the government, everybody knows that if you will go to the government mandi run by the government officials, they will not purchase your produce. They will take some excuses and they will push towards the private players. So why not government can put it, which is a very easy thing. After all, they are not favoring me or any big corporate houses. They have to favor the farmers. My point is this, time is very short. 2 minutes for you, Mr. Narayan. Mr. Rajshekharan, please.
No, I think what you have said is very important, and I think it's a matter of discussion for another session, because it's too complicated to talk in 2 minutes. But I totally agree that the communication campaign has not been as effective as it should have been. And that's a big issue. And this is emotional. Let's also face it. There are facts, there are emotions. When emotions run very high, people don't listen to facts. So the actual communication of facts at the grassroots level should be the responsibility of the party or the workers on the ground. It's not about full page ads in newspapers. There are a million ways in which you can communicate, and that's not been very effective. Now, I'll go back to some very, very important points that Dr. Abdul Salam said, to which I totally agree. We look at those 4 pillars. Let me just bring 30 seconds of my corporate experience. If you want a good operations, the first thing you do is a good recruitment. If you don't have good people to start with, you cannot have a good operation. And that's pure private sector thinking. Or take Indian Institute of Management. IIM is very good because they take the best people. No, it's not just the quality of the education itself. And being an educationist, I'm sure Dr. Salam would agree to this. And unfortunately, politics is the only profession where there are no minimum standards. You can be illiterate, you can be anybody. And those days are gone, because on one side you have the representation and the trust of the people. On the other side, the ability to understand the complexities of the new world and to make meaningful decisions, what I call informed judgments, is extremely important in today's democracy. And if that is not there, and it cannot work. So I think control, and I would probably close it in the interest of time to say that to Dr. Bose, saying that I think there is a need for a very powerful committee to look at reforming democracy, and in a very serious manner, because there are some very important issues. Why don't we take services to the people? I also have some serious concerns about the IAS cadre. Dr. Bose is an exception, because the kind of training, the kind of consolidation of power at a collector's level was probably very suitable for the British regime to rule the country. And there are very good officers, there are very bad officers as well. But the concentration of power in a district collector is very high. Judicial, there's all kinds of powers concentrated, and that's easy prey for politicians.
Okay.
So I think there are quite a lot of things there. So it's a very, very different approach, probably a very different exercise. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rashikran. I would like to just inform Dr. Salam and to you, although I was not there, you might be, you can vouch. What I heard and I learned when Dr. C.V. Anand Bose was collector, he made a point to see to it that the officers should go to the grassroots level, and no person should come to his office. And he has made a point which has become very, very popular. So I am sure that what you mean is that all officers now also should do the same thing what Dr. Bose has done many, many years back. So thank you very much. Today, because of the paucity of time and the topic is so huge, we can go for hours and hours together. But anyways, so today you have seen how the merits of the democracy, no one wants to go for mobocracy. Mobocracy is not the correct form, and it's not from now. From the very beginning, what philosopher Aristotle has said, what others have said, mobocracy is not the solution. If you want anything to be listened, please do go talk to them peacefully, try to convince them point by points, but not to restore the things which is going on right now is unfortunate. It is not only, it is not giving the hardship to a particular city or a district, but the entire country, and the name of our country is going down, which is not at all acceptable. And I'm sure the better sense will prevail on both the sides, and solution will come as soon as possible. Thank you very much for joining today's very controversial but very current topic. And today's program, which has been live telecasted by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV, News Gaon se Samvad Sarokar News, as well as was shown live on YouTube and Facebook. And our endeavor is to bring to you the current thing every day. And tomorrow, media conference with Lal Goel. The topic is pink ball test. Yes, you have heard correctly, pink ball test. As you know, the Indian cricket team is in Australia, and they are going to play day after tomorrow the first day and night cricket test match in Australia with Australia. So that is called pink ball because it is played by the pink ball, not the white or the red ball. And our panelists are Mr. Surendra Khanna, member, Indian Premier League IPL Governing Council, former Indian cricketer, New Delhi, wing commander, retired Arjit Ghosh, former Ranji Trophy cricketer, coach and match referee, and former Secretary Air Force Sports Board, Bengaluru, and advocate Kanishka Tyagi, sports law expert and sports anchor, New Delhi. So please tune in tomorrow for media conference with Lal Goel at 10:30 a.m. Thank you very much, Dr. C.V. Anand Bose. Thank you very much, Dr. M. Abdul Salam. And thank you very much, Mr. Rajshekharan, for joining and giving your expert, enlightened views. Thank you, all the viewers, for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.